Paris Dakar Rally with
Euromaster, the European tyre specialist.
And Mitsubishi Motors Corporation.
Day 5 in the Dakar and the second day in Morocco between Air Rashidia and Ouarzazate, and motorbikes trying to find the correct route. Stefan Peter-Hansel lost his overall lead today after just a day at the top when he and Kari Tiernan got lost. The new bike leader is 40-year-old Italian Fabrizio Mioni, who set the pace on his KTM by 1 minute 39 seconds over the 200 miles. In the cars, problems for the Pro Trucks of Larry Ragland and Pierre Lartigue. Bruno Savi maintains the overall lead but is beaten on the stage by Kenjiro Shinazuka. And there are numerous problems for the Nissans entered by the Dassault team. Yesterday's first stage in Africa was over clearly defined tracks, not requiring much specialised navigation, but the narrowness of the trails made it difficult for the cars to overtake the slower bikes. One bike that was not going slowly was the number 1 of Stefan Peter-Hansel. He set the fastest pace and took over the overall lead. In the cars, Hiroshi Masuoka with Andreas Schulz set the pace aboard their Mitsubishi Challenger, the long wheelbase version of the Mitsubishi Pajero. Bruno Savi was lucky to avoid any serious problems when he hit the ditch, but the others carried on okay. There were problems, however, for some of the competitors throughout the course of yesterday. The first of the African stages causing the first of the big problems. This was the vehicle of Ignacio Bulto, the Nissan Terrano of the Spanish team. Two brothers, in fact, sharing that car. They damaged it fairly heftily after rolling it, running outside the top 100. Help from Javier Revuelta and his Nissan, but obviously a lot of damage done. I made a mistake. I was looking for the checkpoint and I just lost concentration. The car went sideways. It was my mistake. So disappointment for Alvaro Buto. More disappointment for Nissan, though, with the works car of Philippe Vonberg in serious trouble. It's a pity. We broke part of the front suspension on this very, very flat piece of track. We've been trying to repair it, but we've been here for 2 hours now. So great disappointment for Philippe Vonberg. Jean-Paul Cotre, his co-driver, trying to sort something out with that front suspension, but quite a lot of damage had been done when it pulled itself out. Jean-Paul Cotre trying all sorts of things to try and make sure they could get going again. Vonberg had been running extremely well, particularly when the competitors left Spain and moved into Africa. He was well up in the overall reckoning, and he said in one of the interviews earlier on over the weekend that he reckoned that he could really give the Mitsubishis a run for their money. The turbo diesel, 230 horsepower Toyota, really a good machine, perhaps not quite as developed as the Mitsubishi Pajeros of the Sonauto Radiar team. More people stopping off to see if they could help. Anthony Georget in the Nissan, the Frenchman, stopping to see if he could lend a hand, but there really wasn't very much he could do to help, and darkness was beginning to descend. So Philippe Vonberg helped him instead, cleaning up the headlamps. So for Toyota, a disappointing day because further down the track as well, Jose Maria Servia was also having his own troubles. Eventually they managed to get this Toyota back to the service area where they could have a look at the damage, as Jean-Paul Cottret explained. Well, the whole mounting has gone basically, and the wheel went underneath the car, the wishbone, the steering, all went. Everything was damaged in the incident. So it was a bit of a disaster really for Philippe Bomberg yesterday.
Donc je regrette beaucoup cette spéciale qui était magnifique et j'espérais vraiment faire un très beau coup.
Well, it's a pity, but there's still some good stages to come, so perhaps we can make up some ground. So Philippe Bomberg was confined to taking a taxi back to the hotel last night, losing a great deal of time. But as I mentioned, his teammate Servia losing even more. Today's stage was a 344-kilometre trail, which put the emphasis on the driving and riding skills, crossing the Chebi sand dunes in the first third of the test and then proceeding to Ouarzazate. One 167 bikers took the start of the stage this morning. 4 French riders were unable to continue. Temperature around 18 degrees, a little bit cloudy. There was even some rain in the air, believe it or not, even though we were in North Africa. Stefan Pederhansel setting the pace initially over the stage. The man really everybody expecting to continue to stretch his lead. He'd taken the lead yesterday and it looked as though he was set to continue to do so. Helicopter pictures from above reminding everyone of a very close escape for some French journalists on yesterday's stage. It was a helicopter crash involving a journalist and a cameraman for the French channel France 3, but miraculously no one was seriously hurt, although the pilot suffered arm and shoulder injuries and has been flown back to France. The debris was spread over around 50 meters, and the motorcyclists who came upon the scene were obviously very concerned indeed. They were actually filming Pederhansel when it happened, but thankfully, as I say, there were no serious injuries in that incident. Back to today's event, and Stefan Pederhansel was riding along with Kari Tiernen, number 11 here, the Finnish brilliant enduro rider of the last 10 years. But the two of them didn't manage to get it quite right. Although they were going very quickly, as I mentioned, over the first part of the stage, it was to go wrong for them a little bit later on in terms of navigation. There are several checkpoints along the way on each of these routes. Normally there's 4 checkpoints as they go along. They have to get into the checkpoint, and for the motorcyclists it's very important that they go there to refuel as well. The cars have enough fuel on board to be able to make it through the entire stage without having to refuel, but for the motorcyclists it is important to do some quick refueling before continuing on. As they came into this checkpoint, Pederhansel and Tiernen, as I mentioned, were basically setting the pace, although there was a slight problem for Stefan Pederhansel. As the refueling operation started, he leapt to start undoing some of the bits and pieces at the side of the engine cover of his Yamaha, and it proved that there was a gear selection problem that was slowing him down somewhat. In fact, he nearly got a bunch of petrol in his face, which didn't help too much. But Pederhansel explained what was going on. My gearbox is locked in 3rd gear. It's been like that for about 100 kilometers. So I have to repair it. It's just going to lose me too much time. So Pederhansel getting to work with the spanners. He's got one of the best support crews there is in the Dakar, the Yamaha Motor France team, who've been doing this for so many years. Kari Tiernen riding alongside him though.
At the beginning I think that he must have some problem because he was going very slow, but I couldn't pass him because there was so much dust.
And Tiernan would be the first one to get away from this checkpoint, having refueled. He didn't have any mechanical worries, and so he was able to continue. But Peter Hansel then went after him, and it was at around this time, as Alain Perez also caught up to these two, that it all went wrong. There was some bit of confusion on the route to take a little further along, where there was a very faint route off to the right, which was the correct route. A lot of riders, including Peter Hansel and Tiernan, just went straight on and missed the right fork altogether. Peter Hansel still a little bit concerned perhaps about his mechanical problems, and involved with Tiernan as well, perhaps wasn't concentrating enough on the navigation. He went a long way down the route before he realised he'd gone wrong, and that lost him around 20 minutes. He wasn't the only one to get it wrong, but it did mean that he lost the overall lead. And that picture, the classic sight of motorcyclists circling, trying to find their route, we've seen it so many times on the Dakar. Today, it was the 5 times winner who made the mistake. Two riders having some nasty moments. One Dutch rider breaking his wrists today in a fall and marking the end of his attempt to make it to Dakar. Fastest today was Fabrizio Mioni, the Italian, and by doing so he's taken the overall lead of the rally. Juan Roma right up there with him though in the overall ranking. The two of them rode together today. Terry Magnaldi on another KTM, still riding with a headache after his fall on one of the spectator stages in Europe, where he managed to break his crash helmet, but he moved up from 15th to 4th place today, thanks to getting the navigation right. And Eddie Orioli also had a reasonable day aboard his BMW F650. He's up to 8th overall. The Slovenian Jaroslav Katrinak has moved up into 6th position, and the Spaniard Jordi Arcarons, number 4, on another of the KTMs, down in 9th place after yesterday's stage, but today's result, 6th fastest, sees him move up into more familiar territory, the top 3. Well, I had that little mechanical problem at the start, and I really just wasn't concentrating enough on the track, on the route that I had to follow, and I then got lost following another rider. It just happens sometimes. The Dakar is still long. My objective is not to think of the classification. I want to ride steadily and ride safely in Morocco. For me, the Dakar begins at Zouerat. I won today, but it really doesn't mean anything.
Perché secondo me la Dakar comincia a Zouerat, e quindi il fatto che oggi abbia vinto non vuol dire niente.
It was okay for me, but it's a long way until we get to Dakar. Lots of stages still to go and lots of dangers along the way. It's good to know that you're first or right up there, but tomorrow I won't be thinking of that. I'll just ride quietly. If everything is okay, then I shall hopefully be at the top of the table.
Pero sin preocuparme demasiado de ir líder de la carrera.
So the results of today's stage, seeing Mioni ahead of Roma. Let me tell you that John Deacon had a good stage. The British rider was 9th fastest on today's stage, which has put him up into 13th position overall. He did have a mishap after the stage though. Unfortunately, he hit a car during the liaison stage after the special, but it seems that he got away with it and is okay. So all happening as we go into Africa with the bikes. We'll be back with the cars.
Me llamo Juan. Soy un hombre muy solicitado, con una sólida reputación. Soy especialista y formo parte de la red más importante de Europa. Más de 9.000 profesionales dedicados a velar por su seguridad. Revisamos, reparamos y cambiamos los neumáticos de su coche si es necesario. Es nuestro oficio. A su entera satisfacción. Sabemos que es la mejor manera de volver a verle.
Euromaster, the European tire specialist.
You may be surprised at just how far the new Mitsubishi Pajero will take you. Hi! So, how about a ride? The the all-terrain vehicle that redefines freedom.
Back to the Paris-Dakar Rally with
Euromaster, the European tyre specialist.
Let's hear more about the rally from team manager of the Mitsubishi
Compared
team.
with last car's winning Pajero, this car looks almost like a prototype, but it is in reality absolutely standard car. It is already sold in Japan since September. 3,000 cars are already built. And the main difference between this one from last year and the new one is the rear suspension. I show it to you. We have now an independent rear suspension which is fitted to the absolutely standard frame of the Pajero. We specially adapted the shock absorbers for sure for the Paris-Dakar. We have now 3 shock absorbers and 1 bump stop. And I hope that this new system will help us to win again Paris-Dakar.
So Ulrich Bremer hoping for good things. Jutta Kleinschmidt also hoping for good things from her buggy. And here she says, good morning. It's the start of the second African stage. You wouldn't know it, would you, looking at the cloak, the anorak she's wearing. She says it's 10 o'clock in the morning and it's the first time that we're really getting into the sand and the dunes that Africa is so famous for. I have my sand ladders with me, but I hope that in the little short area of dunes that we have today that we won't have to use them. Today we'll be trying to attack and basically see what happens. The beautiful Moroccan scenery. And even out here, there are crowds of people wanting to see the rally as it passes by. Bruno Sabi, Jean-Pierre Fontenay, and Kenjiro Shinazuka out to set the pace once again. Mitsubishi is managing to maintain their time at the top of the standings today, but it wasn't Bruno Sabi, the overall leader of the event, who set the fastest time. It was indeed Kenjiro Shinazuka who set the pace this time along. Winner last year, Kenjiro Shinazuka, and becoming the second Japanese driver in a row to win a stage, with Hiroshi Masuoka having won yesterday. The Mitsubishis could do with a little bit more competition, and having said that, Jean-Louis Schlesser put in a good run today, actually splitting them. He was third fastest and just ahead of Jean-Pierre Fontenay. In the dunes, some of the going became a little bit difficult for bikes and cars alike, but for these Mitsubishis, it really didn't seem to be any problem at all. Many of the teams deciding to run slightly softer tyre pressures to deal with these much softer conditions. But as you can see with the windscreen wipers going on quite a few of the vehicles, it was actually quite a misty and a little bit of rain around. Even though there was the desert, there was also some rain, and that made the conditions quite difficult. Quite damp sand, quite easy to get bogged down in it. It also made things difficult in terms of visibility. The bike riders were finding their visors getting splattered with this damp sand, and the car drivers as well, particularly those who decide to run without windscreens. Why would they do that, you ask? Well, the pro trucks have indeed been running without windscreens, and that was to cause some problems for Pierre Lartigue in particular. Larry Ragland was also in trouble, and here we're hearing from Jérôme Rivière, his co-driver, trying to guide the American through the dunes.
Careful! Go, 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 go!
Jérôme Rivière, a driver himself, and has achieved some good results in the past in two-wheel drive buggies. And very impressed with Larry Ragland's driving, particularly on that narrow stage yesterday. He said it was just amazing how accurate Ragland was with this very wayward-looking pro truck. It looks as though it's sideways everywhere. He said he couldn't believe how he kept it off, hitting some earth banks all along the way. But Ragland had problems today with a broken gearbox. He wasn't the only one in trouble. Some of them got stuck in the sand today, not really surprising, I suppose. This was the number 271 of Akihiko Saka, the Isuzu from Japan, and one of the early casualties of the soft conditions. Another view of Larry Ragland, but he was to suffer a gearbox malady at around 130 kilometers into the stage, and no sign of Ragland having made it out of the stage as we speak to you this evening. More help for the stricken Isuzu of Akihiko Saka. Meanwhile, the Mitsubishis just carried on regardless. Bruno Sabi, the first to reach the checkpoint a few seconds later. It's Kenjiro Shinazuka, who ended up, in fact, setting the fastest time today. Not by a great deal, but just enough to move him up into second place overall again. And then Jean-Pierre Fontenay follows through in third. Jutta Kleinschmidt set the 6th fastest time today. She's in 5th place overall. Jean-Louis Schlesser, as I mentioned, was ahead of one of the Mitsubishis today. This was Pierre Lartigue, though, struggling through the sand with the two-wheel drive pro truck. And of course, Pierre Lartigue's been a bit more used to four-wheel drive in recent years. 3 times winner of the Dakar, 4 times Rally Raid world champion, but aboard a Citroën with four-wheel drive. And this pro truck with just rear-wheel drive proving to be a little bit more challenging to get through the dunes. It really did prove to be a bad day for the pro trucks, what with those gearbox problems for Ragland and these problems for Lartigue, which were confirmed with when he got some muck in his eyes as well and had to go back to the start and get them cleaned out.
I think we lost the gearbox. We know we did, either that or the converter. All we have is neutral. So it was running perfect right until just poof, that was it.